I was thinking about the next, 5, 10, 15 years, and I was looking at the people who were at the ranks that were in my future, and they were all miserable, like miserable and staying so late and just like hated their lives. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to do this. This is a choice.
Welcome back to another episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth podcast. Landry Fields here with another episode this week, and excited for one of my new friends here that is a recent transplant to the Lexington, Central Kentucky area. Without further ado, welcome to the show, Shelby Johnson here.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
Absolutely, Shelby. So we've gotten to know each other from mutual acquaintances, and it's pretty cool to see how, as you've experienced the small, in some ways there's still a small town feel to Lexington, even though it's rather large, but how quickly you can kind of meet this person, they can move you, connect you with this person, et cetera.
Crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's like nowhere I've ever lived before.
Yeah.
And I've lived a lot of places.
Well, definitely we can get into that. So, hop back in the DeLorean then. Where are you from? How'd you kind of get to what you've obviously, to preface a lot of this story, you've done a lot of real estate and rental property and stuff like that in a short amount of time, I would say, compared to most people, which has been awesome. Some cool stories we'll definitely get into, especially how you and your husband meet, which I think is really cool and fun. Before we start that, really kind of explain who you are, where you came from, and some of your background there.
Yeah, sure. So when people ask me where I'm from, that's a really hard question for me because my dad was in the military and I was the new kid every single year. From 7th to 8th grade is the first time I went back and knew anyone at school.
Wow. Yeah. 7th to 8th grade?
7th to 8th grade was the very first year.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I was the new kid, but that's fine.
I guess in some ways you just get used to adapting and so forth like that, normal to you. But
yeah, so
was it almost weird that year?
It was weird, and then it's also weird now because I've never thought of living somewhere long term. Okay. I've always been like, this is short term, because after my dad was in the military, then I was in high school for the 4 years in the same place, which was amazing. But then I went to college, for 4 years, and then
where'd you go to school? Are you allowed to say it here?
Oh, University of South Carolina.
Oh, okay.
Go Gamecocks.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah, well, I shouldn't say that. Go Cats.
Yeah, no.
Oops.
Wow.
But
no.
Then I joined the military.
Okay.
And so again, I was at most 3 years in a place moving, and it wasn't until I moved here, which was September of last year, 2023, that I was like, this is actually where I want to stay forever. And it's like a kind of weird.
And you were kind of like trying to figure out more of like a choice scenario of where you just wanted to go and live at this point. It wasn't like something brought you here. You kind of chose it, which I think is really cool in that sense, right?
Yeah, I looked all over the country. But it's really because my dad remarried a woman who's from here. And I had been visiting here with my husband for like Thanksgiving. So I was like, wow, this place is amazing.
So your dad,
screw it, let's move here.
So your dad's here then in that sense now?
My dad's here, yeah.
But before that, you probably would have been I'll never be there.
I would never have even thought Kentucky ever. Like it wouldn't have been an option in my brain. And now, but I am so glad that I'm here.
We had friends in this past weekend that had never stepped foot in the state of Kentucky from Nebraska. And I was like, selfishly, guys, I'm so glad you're coming because I told them to come, April, October. I prefer October. I think it's one of the best months here. But I was like, let me plan it. I'm going to plan everything out for you. You're going to love it type of scenario. So we did like full day of like Buffalo Trace. We ended up scoring Blanton's, which was for bourbon snob. We know that's one of the better ones there that you can get. Then we went to like Bardstown. Have you been to Bardstown yet?
No.
Okay. Well, we'll have to talk a little bit. We'll have to talk a little bit more. Oh yeah, we'll have to talk a little bit more about it. So Bardstown's the other mecca of all the distilleries.
Okay.
And so we did Heaven Hill. It's the best, cutest downtown that's always hopping. It's like a really small downtown, but so many people are typically there just from the bourbon tours and stuff like that. The other thing you'll quickly figure out, have you been to a distillery tour yet?
I have, yeah.
So if I'm ever on one, and if there's some party with me that's from Kentucky, we're the only ones from Kentucky every time on these tours. And it was like weird to I just thought, I didn't realize that like everybody was coming from around the country to these things. It's like Napa Valley, but for bourbon. Mm-hmm. But Bardstown's kind of like one of those mecca things there. And we went to Heaven Hill there, and then we went down to Maker's Mark. Have to go to Maker's Mark. Okay. People love, hate, whatever Maker's Mark, but distillery tour wise, you still have to go. It's one of the most beautiful areas. I'll show you some pictures after this. So we did all that in like a day. And then the next day we did, of course, Keeneland, which was awesome. You've obviously been to that.
Yeah.
And then I sent them down to, they did a couple nights down in the Gorge area, some cabins down there. So.
And now they're moving here.
I wish. I don't think so, unfortunately, but yeah, I love it anyway. So I'll get off the
I love it.
And honestly, it took me. I've said it before a million times on this podcast, but it took me traveling to appreciate what we had here, and so it's pretty cool to see that you kind of chose it in some ways
sure.
outside of that. So,
Yeah.
so military-wise, where all did you live?
My first duty station. Well, I went to school in Columbia, South Carolina, is where they have Fort Jackson.
Yep.
And then Fort Lewis, Washington State. So totally the other side of the country was my first duty station. Stayed there for a couple of years. And then after more schooling, I went to Fort Bragg, which is Fayetteville, North Carolina. And I think they recently changed the name to Fort Liberty because they went and they changed all of the military installation names.
Okay.
Yeah, sidebar, but.
So you've really been everywhere. Seen it.
I've been
lived kind of almost everywhere in some respects.
Places,
so, and then you came to Lexington. That's pretty cool. So you though have jumped into real estate, and I think jumping into real estate is probably an understatement in that sense. But I don't know the full story in that sense. So really, kind of what drove you to kind of really start thinking about the idea of getting into real estate investing and so forth to begin with? We'll start there.
The military inspired me.
Really?
Yeah. Well, okay. So I loved the military for my first couple of years, but then when I moved to Fort Bragg, the 82nd Airborne Division is widely known, notorious in the military. And they have just very, like, it's always been done this way, very, like, alpha man, type of, which is fine. And I can totally, like, hold my own.
Right.
But I was thinking about the next, 5, 10, 15 years, and I was looking at the people who were at the ranks that were in my future, and they were all miserable. Like, miserable and staying so late and just, like, hated their lives. And I was like, you know what? I don't have to do this. This is a choice. What other options? And the military was really, it's restrictive in a lot of ways for what you can do with your time. So it was kind of like a pendulum swing the opposite direction, where it's like, where can I have the most freedom possible? And that led to real estate investing. I
assume flexibility in some respect was the key there as well.
Totally. Okay. Yes. Flexibility. And then financial freedom.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't want to trade my time for money. And so I just started researching, and I read some Robert Kiyosaki and stumbled on Bigger Pockets.
That's exactly where I started
Game
too.
Over.
Yeah. Did you ever play the game, by the way?
I haven't.
I'm a big proponent. I may have mentioned it already, but if you might, you should go play the board game.
Okay.
If you don't want to read the book, go play the board game Cash Flow.
Yeah.
And I even bought the kids' version for my kids, so they're starting to realize what's a liability versus an asset. I'm like, that's all I really want you to care about right now, type of scenario. Not how much money you have to win, type of scenario, like life, the board game life. I feel like so many people start that way. So what age were you when you first kind of opened that door then, as far as jumping into it? And I won't ask you how old you are now, but just like, I think it's cool to like
I'm
people.
34. I just turned.
Okay. But just to inspire people who obviously it feels like it's such a daunting task to get into this type of business sometimes in some respects.
It was 2017, which for me, I was born in 1990, makes the math easy. Yeah. I was 27.
Okay.
And that is when I first started exploring options. And I actually had bought a property when I lived in Washington State with my VA loan. So that's 0% down. Yep. And then I just kept it when I moved and rented it out.
Nice.
And I was looking at the appreciation is wild. I bought that thing for $158. It's worth like $375 now, 0% down. I've never even changed the carpet. Like, I've never painted it. Wow. It's like the tenant's amazing. So anyway, which is like the only amazing tenant I've had ever.
Yeah. Which leads me to ask this question, actually. Yeah. If you have, I don't even know this, so you could probably educate me on this. If you have obviously appreciation there, and that's probably, was that an entity or your own personal name still?
Personal.
Okay, so then it was probably easy to take the money out of that and put it into other places versus if it had been an entity.
I haven't touched it. Everything is still just chilling there. But yeah, I mean,
a lot of people do. Okay.
I've toyed with that a lot.
Yeah.
But I never actually pulled the trigger on anything. But it was about that time when I stumbled into real estate, like thinking about it, that I was paying attention. I was like, oh, I already have a property. And I was like, oh, this works. I have proof of concept that I stumbled into.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, okay, I can do this. I might as well get my real estate license as an easy way to make money. Which is jokes on me.
Right.
And
I think it jokes on a lot of people when they think that, though.
And I love it.
Like, or probably obsessed. Real estate investing too. People think oh, it's so easy. You just make so much money,
and you can make money.
Like, no, I don't really make much money off of
it. Oh no, for sure. We can talk about that too.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was 27. That's when I decided to get out, and it was by the end of that first year that I got my license. So this is 2017.
Yep.
And bought my first intentional rental property.
Nice.
And then when I got out of the Army in 2018, by the end of that year, I was Keller Williams Rookie of the Year for the agent side of things. I closed 48 my first year by myself. And then I had 16 doors in my portfolio by year one. And then year two, I started Five Pillars.
If that doesn't scream hustle, I don't know what is. But then you didn't stop there. Keep going.
Right. Yeah. By year 2, I had 40 units, and these are doors.
Right.
They're not individual properties.
Right. Exactly.
And some of them are partnerships. Cause it does grind my gears on like, they're like, oh, I have 1,000 doors. I'm like, you own 1% into syndication. You don't, you know what I mean?
Well, me and my business partner, and I'll go ahead and jump into this because we just, me and him are 50-50 partners. We had 19 doors up to this year. So, you do the easy math. I know 9.5 personally sell since we're 50%.
Yeah.
But then we entered into a partnership. So we just closed on, I was telling you a little bit about the previewing this, but I just closed. It's official. I didn't want to, knock on wood and something happened to the deal. But the beauty of sometimes of who I connect with insurance and so forth like that is had a guy walk into my office here that was referred to me. I actually don't even know who referred him to me, which is still, I need to go ask him because that's still a wild scenario. But anyway, he had 26 units in Radcliffe, Kentucky, which is the Fort Knox area. I'm sure at least you've obviously heard of Fort Knox, but it's right next to E-Town. Okay. E-Town's kind of like an area that's about to kind of probably be a next up-and-coming town for sure, in the sense that there's about a bunch of like big battery plants for some of the new hybrid cars and so forth like that they're building. I mean, it's between Louisville and Bowling Green, so it's fairly close to Louisville as well. But 26 units apartments, and he started sitting in my office. He's like, I really don't know if I even want to keep them. I've had them since 1983. I'm like, my ears perk up. I'm like, oh, really?
Tell me more.
Tell me more. / let me tell you let me tell you about this thing called seller financing that I did with most people that live in the show know I did 12 units seller financing, just me and my business partner last year.
Cool. That's awesome.
The guy didn't walk in my office. It was just, we found that one. But this one was sitting here, and so I'm like telling them all about this, and that was back in like, I want to say February, March, and it kind of took a whole process in that sense. But we just closed last week, but brought in 2 business partners that had more like money, and it's a whole crazy story how some connections I had to this guy randomly through my wife, because he was like my wife's like childhood doctor, apparently from the small town. We made these connections and this other guy. Anyway, we couldn't have worked it out without like all 4 of us individually in some capacity. But 26 units, of course, which I own 25% of, and so that was crazy. So we closed on 26 units. I'll actually let you know because you're going to love this deal. 20-year.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask. What are the terms?
What
is it?
No, it's a 25 AM, but it's 20-year. It's not like
wow.
Yeah.
How old is this guy?
He's fairly old.
Okay.
I mean, but we don't have to keep it that long, obviously,
right.
and like that. But somehow we worked it out for that, and I think it was definitely sub 6, 5, 5.75 interest rate or something like that,
wow.
and so forth. And
are you so stoked?
But they hadn't been touched since like '83, so which is what you want.
Were they in good condition though? Were they like maintained at least?
Maintained. They weren't falling apart. There's definitely things to address, and a lot of opportunity to increase rent, be able to update units as they come available and increase the rents. Yeah. And you having pretty much a steady supply of renters with either the growth of E-Town or Elizabethtown, for those who don't know. And then it's there next to Fort Knox. You get a lot of the just rollover from military coming in through there.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, we got 6 more units. So now we're at 45, and we just started this, I think, 2.5 years ago. So,
my gosh.
So for me too, at the same time, I don't see, and just so people know, again, back to this whole cash flow thing, I really don't see any profit of it right now. Everything that's coming into it is all put back into it to update said rent.
100%. And that's how I've lived. I mean, this whole time. At my most, I had 74.
Yeah.
And then I, at the peak, sold off the one that was built in 1850 because that was I could see down the road all of the problems that were coming from that one. And then we had one that was like 21 doors in a like D on a good day, like a C minus D area. Okay. And I was like, we can also get rid of this one.
Yeah, so, we're not going to be able to get much higher than that.
Exactly. Like this is the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, all to say, it's like with the cash flow that comes in, even if my accounts are looking nice a certain month, I never touch them.
Yeah.
Like I do not pull from them because I know the next month between turnovers, maybe there's an eviction, a tree fall, whatever the case may be, it's always something. And so I literally never
say tree fall, and I'm not going to say her name, but one of my listeners and clients here has had that actually happen a couple of years back, and it was wild. That tree fell right through the Airbnb type of scenario.
Okay, that happened on in 2018, one of my first properties when I closed, and it was like 2 weeks later, a tree fell. And that same seller I bought a 6-unit from, and then a couple weeks later, a hurricane came through. It was not in a flood zone. The whole area flooded, 6 HVAC units. I was like, real estate investing.
Yeah. No, but to that point, it really, I mean, and it's probably so much so that today as well, harder to get into it from a cash flowing,
from a number standpoint,
lifestyle of like, you think like you don't have to do much and you're just getting money into, pay for your life type of scenario. But I mean, it seems like you're probably similar in that. And like for me, it's all long term. It's 100%. None of it is a short term scenario.
Totally long term. It's the long term play, but also, I mean, it's great. You should, and what Brandon Turner would say, like, don't count on appreciation, like buy for cash flow. I think that's what he used to say. Appreciation was like icing on the cake, but appreciation has been amazing for me in particular.
It's definitely been a lot more than normal. We can't. We can't expect that.
And that's what I was saying. Like, you can't like count on this.
Yeah.
But just the sales that I had at the peak of the market, and then the buyout and like the projected sales that I'm doing now, I'm like, this is the first time I'm going to actually be seeing money from these properties.
Nice.
I'm like, yay.
But I think to that point though, I don't think it's necessarily, I don't think I expect it go, and I don't expect it to like really go down in the sense that, I don't know if you agree or not, but Cardone and some of these others I've seen, I really think this is probably true where, for the last several decades, percentage of people that are homeowners versus renting has been higher, like somewhere in mid 50s, some higher 50-some% of people that need a place to live own a home versus rent.
Yeah.
But it definitely seems like the trend is now that needle's moving back, shifting. And it seems like the shift's going to move back towards more, maybe only 40-some% of individuals are owning a home versus the higher percentage renting over the next kind of 10 years type of scenario and trend. And of course, you got a lot more people that were. I'm not trying to get political, but there are a lot more people in the U.S. now in the last couple of years than typical as well. So, I mean, in theory, like I think in some places like, there's probably some truth to that people are going to need a place to live, and there's a lot, as you know, a shortage of houses and apartments, et cetera, in general. So, I kind of like the multifamily space right now. There's a lot more headache in some respects, for sure.
Yeah.
I don't. Do you self-manage all yours? Or?
Oh no.
Okay.
I have a property manager, but managing the manager is a real thing, and especially since I've now been geographically separated from the majority of my portfolio for so long. And there's been a lot of changes in my property management company. I had a friend go and walk properties recently and was like absolutely horrified at what she showed me. So, all that to say, make sure that, if you're not physically checking on, still have to manage the manager to an extent, because that's another thing with real estate investing. And like, I'll just get a property manager and I won't worry about it. And it's like, no one will care about your units as much as you do. And like trust but verify, so, and I don't want this to turn into like a horror of whatever. It's just
we've
also
talked about
reality,
before, though.
Because I know that for the first years, like I started dipping my toes in at the end of 2017 and then went hardcore for 3.5 years, and then kind of like stopped for a little bit, settled. But it was rose-colored for me personally. It was rose-colored glasses for years about like real estate could do no wrong in my eye. And not that it's wrong. It's just like there's a lot of realities that people don't talk about very much with like what you said with cash flow or just.
Well, and which David Green kind of mentioned,
he does speak up.
And so for those who don't know, go check out that podcast. I had the luxury and blessing and opportunity to be his first guest on his new show. So he was the host of Bigger Pockets.
Cool.
Yeah, wild for me. And but he was the host of Bigger Pockets, like for you and for me, as far as who we were really probably listening to when we got into it as the contracted host of that real estate investing podcast. Started his own recently, and highly encourage everybody to go hear the David Green show, because he's trying to be more, I wouldn't say brutally honest, but just more real and authentic, as far as it's not all rainbow sunshine type of scenario. There are true realities that you need to make sure you're aware of, or not just like hope for the best and in every scenario. You have to almost plan for the worst, really, in a lot of ways in that sense. So.
It's so tough. And I don't know if he's going to run into this challenge with his listeners. It's that I've realized that most people don't want that. They want to be sold the dream. They want, the vision to buy into. And And I really like David, by the way, because like not only with Bigger Pockets, because he got to interview me when I was on the show.
So we can switch to that. So you were on the Bigger Pockets show back in
2020.
Okay.
Yeah. And then, but he's also been on Rockstar, Real Estate Rockstars, which was the show that I hosted for, a little bit. I interviewed him twice on there.
Oh, okay.
So, and like seeing him at BPCon and stuff like that.
Real Estate Rockstar is still a podcast?
It is still a podcast.
Okay, there
it's
you
just,
go.
I'm no longer the host. So, not as entertaining, of course.
Did you start it?
No, it was started back in 2014.
Okay.
Do you know Pat Hyben? He's like a GoPro. Do you know GoBundance people? Okay, no worries. But yeah, so 2014, it's a really long-standing podcast, and then it was sold in 2019 to the guy who owns it now, and then I took over hosting for a little over a year just because Aaron, the guy who owns it, was like, I'm slammed, like this is the, and I was like, dude, I'll do it as I figure out what I want to do with my life.
Yeah, so, you're like, but and you probably hadn't done podcasting before that?
I had been interviewed on a ton, and I had recently started my own podcast with my co-host, but I had very little, like, almost no experience. Like it took me months before I was like, oh, I actually know what I'm doing now. Why did anyone let me take over this? Literally, according to ChatGPT, it's the #1 real estate agent podcast in the world. Yeah. So I'm like,
that's
why
right. I think I've seen that. It's usually Real Estate Rockstar and Bigger Pockets, right? Usually
Bigger
two
Pockets
are the big
is
ones.
the investor one, and Rockstars is the agent one. But yeah,
that's right.
I was like, I had no business hosting this. But I learned.
Honestly, that's the way for the first 2 years when I started this stuff with real estate. Like, I feel like I'm not really an expert here, guys.
Like,
I'm just I'm trying to become an expert at real estate in some respects, and I'm just trying to ask the questions that those would be.
Oh, that's too,
being in front of a mic, for my past was no problem. And I think the way my brain is wired, where I was usually a lot of times I've already got the next question. I'm like, oh, there's a question I want to ask there, and I'm always having to kind of bite my tongue. That it works out well in this type of scenario that doesn't get that stagnant kind of scenario. But there is an art form to it, and I used to be very stingent on here's all the list of questions, here's a background scenario.
I started that way too.
And then I was like, you know what, season 2 I was like, we're just Rogan styling it here and just being like, all right, we rolling, I guess we're good. Let's go. Because you want to it's really just a conversation here in that sense. But having been on, I guess, Bigger Pockets, you actually met your husband that way. Is that correct?
Well, I was on the podcast, and then after a show, comes out like that, then you get a flood of people who reach out in every possible way. And he was one of the people who reached out to me on Instagram. I didn't even reply. He's like gone back and be like, you ghosted me. But anyone who reached out, I had, my business partner at the time, like I'm going to take these people, you're going to take these people, and like attack and conquer. And so he actually spoke to my partner and ended up getting his license and joining my team. And then, I know it's like savage. It's not okay, but that's okay.
Well, I mean, but he the whole play for him was
he was like, well, he tells me this now, who knows? But he said, I'm going to marry that girl. When he was listening to it, like, I'm going to marry that girl. And then he did.
Hey, in his defense, there's some similarities, but your early days of Facebook, I had a band, so I used to think I was moving to Nashville for music in some respects, and very grateful that door didn't open, and had the opportunity to play for some really cool people and travel around and playing. But I had originally this band back that never made it even to one show. Okay, so let's just clarify. I've had several bands, none of them ever made it to one show, or one of them made to one show, and then I had one that made it to like 60, 70 shows. But my wife, Joanna, and she was a fan of the the Facebook page early on. Like, this is 2008 probably type of scenario, and I was like, wait, we're friends on Facebook. How are we friends on Facebook? Because I know this sounds stuck up, but I didn't add people on Facebook. I let them add me. I will now for sure. But I was like, I'm not just trying to sit here and collect as many. Early days of Facebook, you're like, how many friends can I get? Type of scenario, which is kind of like LinkedIn now. But
totally. Oh my gosh.
But I remember I messaged her just like, oh, I'm thanking all the fans of the band type of scenario, and clearly was not. And apparently she knew and realized I wasn't. But she was like, I don't know what that says about me, but I still went with it type of scenario. But we went on one date, and I was like, that's a lot. My dad was like, how'd it go? And I was like, it's the last first date I'll go on type of scenario. So some similar things, The guys tend to know more before the girls, right? That's the moral of this story here. Sometimes.
Apparently so.
So you guys end up. When did you all get married then?
We got married in 2022, September 2022. So that's almost exactly 2 years after the show came out.
And you're like, hey, do you want to move to Kentucky kind of scenario. And
Yeah. Actually, I think it was his idea.
Okay.
Yeah. Because, I mean, he came with me to visit
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Where was he from originally?
South Dakota. We knew we weren't going there.
Oh, okay. So,
Which,
wait, hold
nothing
on.
against South Dakota.
Right. Was he in your area to join your team, or was it like a remote thing for a while?
He was in the Marines. No. So
okay.
he was in the Marines, and he had just gotten out of the Marines and was
Gotcha.
moving. He was already in North Carolina. It wasn't like hyper. He didn't move across the world.
We didn't go to that extent of like moving to the same town.
No, and he said he was already planning on moving to Charlotte, so that's where I was at the time.
So he says.
I know. The lie detector.
No, he's a good guy. But yeah, I mean, so you've got now here in Lexington then, and so tell me about what you kind of got you're into lately. What you're into lately as far as I know you obviously are starting to kind of make some moves in the real estate here, and I think you just had a huge open house when I saw.
I did.
Like, I don't know,
it was massive. It was awesome.
Was that just a listing or one of your properties?
It was a listing, yeah.
Okay.
So it was
a duplex, right?
It's so crazy, you know, to bring this back to bigger pockets.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I was telling Dawson on his show. I was like, we have not started marketing yet for the fact that, you know, I've been licensed for years in North Carolina, very experienced in the real estate world, was not planning on getting licensed here in Kentucky. Was like, I'm not going to do sales here, whatever. And then, you know, I was like, what do I want to do with my life? Whatever. Okay, you know what? We're going to do sales again. It's going to be fun. We're going to build from the ground up in a new city where we don't know anyone. It's like, it's a game, right? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, it's a bit of a drug for those that like me and myself
addicted.
too with like,
I'm obsessed.
Yeah.
I'm so obsessed. But anyway, so we decided to get licensed and still are like building behind the scenes systems, processes. You know, I'm big on leverage, like all of the pieces. I want the puzzle to be like exactly how I want it to be. And so
like you have a vision. You're like, and how do I get all these things?
Exactly. Right. And I didn't want to start marketing because I know that as soon as I have clients, my ability to focus deep on the build goes away because I'm servicing, you know, type of thing. So the listing that I have, which by the way, that has gone out the window. I have lots of clients now but we'll talk about that in a second maybe. But my first client, this listing that I just had, the duplex, he messaged me out of the blue. I did not follow him. And literally all he said was, will you sell my duplex for 4%? And I was like, who is this guy? Whatever.
4%?
Yeah. Which,
Heyo.
I told him, I was like, hey, like actually we charge 3% in services, but I would be happy to like, let's reserve that for concessions if need be, whatever. That's not important to the story. But, anyway, like literally, and I was like, yes, I will. Yeah. And so, I was like, dude, where did you find me? How do you know me? He's like, I listened to you on Bigger Pockets back in 2020. I've been following you since then. I was like, no way.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So he's here in Lexington. But yeah, it's a duplex, which duplexes are really popular right now. Yeah. But we also were super strategic with it. It's fully occupied with the tenants. Okay. So like we couldn't just have people go and showing, you know, the property. It would be super disruptive. Right. And so what we did is we decided to go into coming soon status, which means that it shows on the MLS, but it's not on Zillow. It's not on any of the public sites. Right. And then what we did is we ran meta ads to 2 different campaigns. We did a campaign nationwide to investors. Okay. And then we also did a local one for brand awareness, being the picture of the duplex being like duplex in Lexington, like with a little like secret emoji being like, you won't find this one on Zillow. Yeah. So that way people were like, oh, you won't find it on Zillow. And then filled out our form, which we got 120 leads from that, which is crazy. Yeah. And then from there, blocked the showings all the way up until the one-time only chance to see it at the open house. So we had over 40 people at the open house, which is nuts. And then we got 17 offers. Wow. Almost all of them were at or over list. And then we got all cash offer, significantly over list as the one walked in for our seller. So I'm like, back in real estate. Let's do it, baby. I'm so excited.
Well, actually, that brought up a question I was going to ask, in the sense that there's a lot of times someone, maybe they've been in the town forever or something like that, but you obviously having not been here that long. I mean, what are some of the points that you would say as far as someone that wanted to get into it, or even if they're in a small town, et cetera, as far as the keys to, like you've done so already, as far as making connections, you're like, I don't know how to plug in, et cetera, type of, in that sense?
Making connections. That's a really good question. So joining a community that is something that you already love is something that I tell like every new agent. They're like, oh, like, how do I get business? And I'm like, well, what do you already love? What do you already do? Where do people, know, like, and trust you? And so that can be, for me, I didn't have that coming here because I didn't know anyone, right? Yeah. But CrossFit is consistently like my thing that I was like, you know what? That's a great community. People are like die hard in that community. And so that's what I did to, start my integration into like
Yeah.
real life here, which is so funny because that's where I met Aaron White.
Yeah.
Who introduced me to you two, got on his podcast, your podcast, going to the social event thing, and like constantly like through that, like we were talking about before we hit record, it's like everyone knows someone, and the people here are so good about like, oh, you have to meet this person. Yeah. And so each connection just really leads to each other. But anyway, to bring it all back, it's like, I think it's really important to find something that's an authentic fit to yourself because you want to be able to love doing it. You want to be yourself in that setting. And not make it feel like work. Yeah.
I would say, yeah, for sure. And that makes sense on that side. Yeah. Then from just a pure real estate side too, because I think you got to have both of them together in some respects. Like, what does that side look like in that sense as far as trying to figure out and plug in? Obviously, I have thoughts and stuff like that, but I want, you're the one that...
specifically talking for like an agent?
I would say more so someone trying to get into investing. Yeah. Like, they're like, how do I figure out what real estate is even... here, or
I would say for sure go to meetups, like go to all Facebook, go to the Bluegrass, what is it, Real Estate Investors page. That thing is popping, and then go to every single meetup.
Most people don't realize if you can really start to search into Facebook, etc. And that's what I was kind of getting to.
Oh, you were feeding me, you were leading me to the answer.
No. But like,
what if I got it wrong?
There's a lot of just community, local real estate investing communities in that sense, and so I would honestly say there's probably one in your town in some respects, as any kind of major-ish town type of scenario, maybe not like some small town for type of thing, but in general there is, or if not,
create one.
Go create one.
Oh my God. Okay,
right?
Dude. So back in 2018.
Because you did, I think, didn't you?
Yeah, I was going to tell you, but you already know.
I don't know anything. I don't know anything more than that.
So this exact same thing happened in 2018 because I was really into real estate investing. Yeah. I looked around, and maybe investing was cool, but it wasn't that cool like where I was at, and I had no one to talk to about it. And so I was like, you know what? I am going to start a meetup. I'm going to do it. And so that's what I did. And I started Pints and Properties, and I did it every single month. Yeah. And it's actually still going every single month since August 2018. I just don't run it anymore. Right. And it's actually nationwide now, which is pretty cool. So if anyone wants to start
different chapters and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's totally free. Like I just provide checklists. You can do your own thing. Like people are like, why don't you monetize that? And I'm like, just kind of like you before. I'm like, it's one more thing. I don't want to, less is more, man.
Yeah. And there's the old tagline, riches in the niches. If you really just focus down into one thing, like usually you're going to go way further in that sense than trying to spread yourself too thin. Does he say that too?
He says that all the time.
Oh yeah, he does. I think even about Gary Vee does sometimes too, maybe as well.
Well, I mean, I think it's changed over time because I know in the beginning people were like, oh, you have to like diversify and all this stuff. And now everyone's like one thing, which I believe so much more in. Just go really deep on one thing. Yeah. But to bring this back, like you can absolutely start your own, even if you know nothing, which you know, right. And then it's really cool because kind of like a podcast, like you can invite people to come speak, which brings you more connections, and you can be known as the real estate person, even if you don't have any experience, but as the person who brings people together and the connector, or just showing up to the meetup that already exists.
Because I've learned people are way more willing to help you out or kind of give you tips, show you ropes of different kinds than you ever think is out there. You're thinking, who am I? Why would people want to, waste time on me type of scenario? But no, so many people would love to give back the way someone invested into them type of scenario. So definitely don't ever underestimate that opportunity, even if you're like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, that somebody can help you out for sure.
Especially if you show up consistently. That's the thing. There are a lot of people in this world who it's a really quick turn. Yeah. People are in and out all the time. So you might have to show some consistency in that you show up month after month, and then after that, people will pour into you.
For sure. So, outside of that, I mean, as we kind of like wrap up and so forth, like what so far, I'm curious, what are your favorite things about, the Central Kentucky area so far?
Okay. Everyone is freakishly nice.
I think we got rated like the nicest state in the union, which I thought was weird because I feel like sometimes the South or more southern states can sometimes be just as nice or nicer, but
Kentucky is the winner.
Okay.
I went to school in South Carolina. I lived in North Carolina. Okay. And granted, I didn't live on the other ones, but like
maybe it's just the fact that not a ton of people moved here, like they do a lot of those southern states for different stuff or warmer temperatures.
Sure, yeah.
Kentucky's kind of like skipped over a lot, so it's like kind of retained its.
I think that's it.
Local feel in some respects.
For sure.
Okay, so niceness of the people.
The niceness of the people. I think the seasons here are amazing. Yeah. The fact that you get like 4 real seasons, like outside right now, it is the most gorgeous, magical fall wonderland. Every day I wake up and I'm like, I can't believe I live here.
I always say like, I couldn't live any further north than this because you still get like winters, but not like it changes. It's definitely not the South when you get to like Cincinnati, obviously, or that, type of feel as far as, just people and so forth. But yeah, the 4 full seasons is definitely pretty special, I think,
Yeah,
for sure.
it's freaking amazing.
I wish I could keep my pool open a little bit longer than I can.
Oh yeah, you pool party at your house this year?
Yeah, but
I'll be watching for my invite.
Okay. but yeah, we'll have to do a podcast pool party now.
Poolside?
But yeah, like that, that's not a huge deal because, as you know, or have now experienced maybe for the second time, probably truly more so than today and this year in 2024 is how, especially even October is, like I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the podcast here with the fall festivities and stuff like that. So
perfect.
I love it. But yeah, if anybody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so, or what you got? You can plug anything you want.
Sure. The Shelby Show on Instagram is where I just share stories of what I'm doing in my life, which is kind of
a lot of Lexington stuff you've been highlighting on there.
Yeah. So behind the scenes stuff, the Shelby Show on Instagram. And then just in general, fivepillarsteam.com if you want to know more information about my real estate company. 5 spelled out FIVE.
Okay.
Pillars, PILLARS, team, TEAM. Wow, TEAM. Okay. If I know how to spell. But that's where, our history is on there. And then also just like, the process. Because ultimately, what we're doing is real estate transactions, helping people buy, sell, and invest here in Lexington. And I'm obsessed with it. It's such a fun game, and it's a really fun experience to
It's a goal to grow a team as well.
It is, but slowly and much smaller. Because last time I literally had 30 agents on my team in 2 different markets, and it was
a whole nother job.
It was a whole nother job, and I wasn't able to spend time with clients anymore because my time was running the team.
Oh yeah,
and I really want to stay very connected and grounded with what I love, which is real estate.
Well, there you go. Do you have any? By the way, do you have any Airbnbs, or is it all just?
I had at my peak, I had 18, and now
18 Airbnbs.
I had 18. Yeah.
Oh snap!
And shut them down, and I sold off some, and then I have long terms for the rest. So converted them back to long term.
There you go.
But we can talk about that anytime you want. We can do another one.
That's, the Airbnb thing. It's intrigued me, but not from a full blown. Let's jump into this, but more from a tax scenario of being able to get my wife as she knows this plan. She's not really thrilled with it, but I'm like, I need you to be a full-time real estate professional, okay? And the easiest way to do that is if we could buy an Airbnb and you self-manage it. Right. So you spend the 100 hours, so then I can maximize all of the depreciation against taxes that the real estate I do have could afford me, but you're capped out at I think $25,000 as if you're making under around 100 or something like that.
My husband is
100 and under.
The tax one of the two, which has been so nice because he does all the things that I really, really don't like, and I do all the things he doesn't. Personality wise, it's very helpful.
Perfect. Yeah, same with me and my business partner in that sense too. But yeah, I don't know. So the idea of at least one Airbnb has intrigued me, but also from the standpoint of making something that would be a super unique experience. So not the servicing as just we're just replacing a hotel option, but more of
an experience.
I want to go there, whether I'm going to care about leaving it at all type of scenario. Right. So that's kind of intrigued me from probably my artistic, aspect of background of things.
And if I were ever to do it again, that is what I would want to do. And I would want to do it more of you with your wife type of thing where it's self-managed and really way more hands-on. The way I did it before was much more of a business machine. And so they were all pretty standard, and I had a management company. And because of that, when they became incredibly saturated, the Airbnbs, ours didn't stand out because they were meant to be. They were in Fayetteville, which is not a destination market anyway. Okay. But we did have a lot of people come in to see soldiers and retirement ceremonies and stuff like that. So it worked until I got on Bigger Pockets and talked about it, and then everyone and their mom wanted to.
That's right.
I was like, oh, I screwed this up.
I think that's definitely true everywhere right now in that sense for sure.
Saturated.
With the STR aspect or the local, laws or certificates to be able to kind of even have one. I've obviously started to change. Yeah. They've obviously changed here in this area in each county type of scenario. Is that one? By the way, is that one of the weird things that you figured out? Everybody's from a county here. They don't say the city they're from.
Hadn't stumbled on that yet.
Okay.
Look, I'm learning
so people much. That move. So no. So that's the thing. So people we have 120 counties in Kentucky. I think it's one the third most in this country or something like that. There's just a lot of, for the size of the state we have just a ridiculous amount of counties. But unless you're basically from Louisville, people just in Northern Kentucky say Northern Kentucky, Lexington, or Bowling Green. Most of the time, people are not going to say the city they're kind of ish from, they're going to tell you the county they're from.
Okay.
So just be aware that it's going to be a
get a
normal
map.
thing. Like, oh, you from Lexington? Well, I moved here. I'm from, Taylor County, or I'm from whatever.
Oh, I see.
I was always raised in this area-ish, a little bit in Powell County. See, I don't even, I could say it a little bit. Clark County, which is Winchester.
Yeah.
But I've always been like, no, most of my time is from Lexington type of scenario. But it took me a while to figure out like where everything was. I remember getting to college, and I was at University of Kentucky, and everybody was like, I'm like, I have no idea. I've always just kind of like hyper-focused between Cincinnati, Louisville, and Lexington. Outside of that, I didn't really know. And so I kind of had another job that took me around the state a lot. And so I got to really learn a lot more.
That's good.
But I still don't know. I'm still not great at the county scenarios. I'm still better at cities and from a map perspective. It's easy to find something on a map from a city perspective than a county, and for me personally.
Making it tricky for us.
Just so you know, that will be kind of become normal for sure, probably around here in that sense. But
good to know.
No, the SDR thing, it's definitely changed, I think, and like I said, a lot of places are oversaturated in some respects. So that's why, like I agree. The whole idea of it needs to stand out and become the experience itself is a big part of it. And hopefully something I can do at some point here, which would be good. We'll see.
I know you can.
But yeah, it's just more of like, I had so many things and so many, it's
that's
like
one thing at a time, right? Yeah.
One thing at a time.
Less is more.
There's a lot of moving parts on the insurance side. Shout out if anybody has anybody they know in insurance around Central Kentucky or the state of Kentucky that might want to have a conversation with me. I'm going to selfish plug that call me or connect with me so we can talk, because we're definitely expanding and doubling our agency size in the next 6 months or so is the goal. So anyway, with that though, I think we can wrap it up though. And anybody reach out to Shelby. She's awesome. She's definitely come in, just ready to rock and roll in Lexington, which is awesome, and full-blown Lexingtonian and embracing it as much as you can, and I love it. So, but we will see everybody back here on the next episode of the Keys to the Commonwealth podcast. Shelby, thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.